It's Saturday, and welcome to another episode of PO Cubed, your chronological guide to Nintendo's handheld consoles. My name's DD Ash, and this week we're playing Pocket Stadium, Ponta to Hinako no Chindouchuu, Yuutou Hen, Battle Unit Zeoth, Ishida Yoshio Tsumego Paradise, and Gremlins 2, the new batch. Let's start the show.
Εξωγήινοι φορείς έφτασαν. Μόνο Μάριο και εσύ θα τους σταματήσεις. Με τη δύναμη του Game Boy. Super Mario Land από την Nintendo. Ένα παιχνίδι γεμάτο ένταση και δράση. Πώς τα όλα και εσύ θα είσαι ο τελικός νικητής. Super Mario Land. Από τα καλύτερα παιχνίδια του Game Boy. Από την Nintendo. Την πρώτη δύναμη στον κόσμο στα video games.
Pocket Stadium DMG-PKJ, developed and published by Atlus. I know what you're thinking. Pokémon Stadium in 1990? We could only wish so. No, long before that N64 classic came about, we were cursed with the 1 millionth Game Boy baseball game to come out in the first 18 months of its life. It's like there was one per customer or something. Seriously, I don't know why there were so many of them. Extra Bases had 2 sequels less than a year apart, in Famista 2 and 3. What's more frustrating is the only noticeable difference is an updated roster. The games are otherwise identical. Pocket Stadium has been a nightmare to research, largely because of the aforementioned infinitely more famous, infinitely better game with a very similar title. But also because people seem to have, quite rightly, forgotten all about it. Would that I could do so. Credit where it's due, however, Atlus did attempt to air out the cramped old genre a little bit. Pocket Stadium isn't really a baseball game, which would usually rely on the player's reaction time, being able to press the button at just the right time to connect with the ball. Here, you sort of predict what will happen, and if you are right, the game just does it for you. It's more like a baseball management sim, I suppose. Before each pitch, you have to predict, based on a 3x3 grid, where the ball will arrive at. It's a risk-reward kind of deal, whereby choosing to aim for one square means you're less likely to hit the ball, but should it work, the shot will be very powerful. Alternately, choosing to cover 6 or even 9 of the squares, batter-dependent, you're more likely to hit it, allegedly, but the results won't be as spectacular. Pitching works in the exact same way, with you and the CPU basically trying to outguess each other. Thing is that an 8-bit game is so unlikely to have anything resembling intelligent AI programmed into it. By intelligent, I don't mean that it's really smart and can guess all of your moves. I suppose I kinda mean the opposite. The AI isn't intelligent because it does know all of your moves. Am I making any sense here? Whether you are successful seems to be made by some arbitrary probability rather than any elegant and complex formula. It's as if the computer just decides whether or not you win on a coin toss. A heavily weighted coin toss. And that's the entire game right there. You don't have control over anything else. Fielding is completely automatic, as is making the runs. This is the least amount of actually doing baseball things that I've ever seen in a baseball game. It's an interesting concept, I suppose, but the technology or programming nous was just not there, leaving a sour, cheated taste and a game with absolutely zero substance. I spent the first couple of minutes trying to work out why none of the buttons did anything in-game, until I realised that was the point. I really don't know who Pocket Stadium is for. Sports fans? Unlikely. Strategy game fans? Certainly not. Ponta to Hinako no Chindouchuu, Yuutou Hen, DMG-AAJ, developed by Duel and published by Naxatsoft. It's about time we got back to an actual side-scrolling platform adventure, and this one is quite the mystery. There is a dearth of information anywhere on the internet, so I'm surmising as best I can. You play as what I think is a raccoon, Ponta, and his bird friend Hinako as Yuutou Hen, which roughly means strange friends. The pair were the original mammal-slash-bird odd couple, long before Banjo and Kazooie came along. The game is very cartoonish, but don't let that fool you. This is as tough as they come. You mainly control, let's call him for simplicity's sake, Ponta. You are armed with a ping-pong bat that attacks at close range, but also fires out this projectile of energy out in front of you or vertically upwards. Riding on his head is a bird who does nothing until you fling her up in the air. There, it will glide horizontally along, killing anything in its path, before circling gradually downwards, trying to land back on your head. You can actually propel Hinako further upwards by wafting your paddle after you've thrown her. Make sure you catch her, because if Hinako hits the ground, you lose a life. You can see when Hinako is going to drop by paying attention to the seed piles in the top left corner. When Hinako is in flight, these will steadily drop. You need to make sure she's back down on your head before this runs out. There are tons of enemies, and the range on your weapon is very limited indeed. You only have 2 hit points to play with at first, meaning if you get hit twice, you get knocked out. You don't die as such, as long as you wake up in time to catch Hinako. Find a cloud that is dropping raindrops down. It looks at first glance like something you should avoid, but actually these will replenish any health you've lost. There are power-ups and health-ups about the levels, but Ponta can't always reach them. You'll have to learn how to send Hinako across in order to get the more inaccessible ones. It makes the game more beatable if you get this technique down. Sometimes power-ups can be hidden behind leaves. You can blow these away using Ponta's paddle. I was immediately drawn in by this game, as it was not one I'd ever even heard of. The game is very pretty, and the soundtrack is quite excellent. You'll stumble a lot at first. The controls and the hitboxes take some getting used to, but it's not impossible. You'll be in for a rough experience if you attempt it. The game never lets up, even from the very beginning, and manipulating the bird is pretty tricky at first. Some of the enemy movement is very sporadic. Well worth a look, but don't expect a relaxing time. Battle Unit Zeoth DMG-BZ, developed and published by Jalico. Do you like pain? You'll love Battle Unit Zeoth then. Here we have a part side-scrolling, part vertical platformer where you control a guy in a mech suit, tasked with saving the city of New Age from the terrible Grind forces. Actually, there's a pretty cool story, which I think you'll agree has been lacking in most games so far. 42 years before the game takes place, Earth was invaded by these Grind alien robot guys, but Earth was victorious. Or so they thought. It turned out that the Grind had built a secret underground base filled with these self-replicating machines. By the time of our story, they had amassed a veritable army down there, and now they're ready to take vengeance. You control the Zeoth mecha, and as you might guess, it's your job to stop this new attack force, enter the secret base, and destroy everything you find. You need to fight your way through 5 stages, 3 of which are left-to-right auto-scrollers, with a couple of vertical, climbing, descending stages in between. Be prepared to have your metal ass handed to you, virtually straight away. Enemies fly at you with such pace, and bullets can be pretty tough to avoid due to the size of your character and the somewhat unique control methods. You're in a suit capable of flight, but seeing as how you're on Earth, gravity is very much a factor. So rather than flying or having a jump button, the A button activates your jetpacks, which have infinite fuel fortunately, but you need to keep the button pressed to stay in the air. Your vertical placement is completely defined by your ability to balance hovering and descending. up and down actually aim your gun up and down, rather than move you about. Left and right do, obviously. You also have infinite ammo, meaning holding B at all times is pretty much a must. There's no let-up for a second. Pressing B twice in quick sequence activates a hyper bomb that kills everything on screen, apart from the bosses, but takes off 2 of your precious health units. There are weapon upgrades, which transform your puny starting weaponry to a formidable spread of power. You start with something called a Vulcan cannon, not related to Star Trek, and collecting power-up blocks allow you to power it up a couple of times into either a beam shot or a laser. They're both pretty strong once you upgrade them, but I find that the beam has a better spread and a faster fire rate, so even though it's a little weaker, the DPS is higher. The challenge is very real in this game, so steel yourself. Health is really hard to come by, and there are no invulnerability frames when you get hit. Oh yeah, there are no extra lives or midway checkpoints either. You'll get the opportunity to continue infinitely, but you still need to beat the whole level in one strike. This is very harsh indeed, and adds to the already crazy difficulty. A couple of respawns per stage wouldn't have hurt. If you manage to make it to the bosses, it only gets worse. They are brutal with lots of attack variation. They'll take plenty of learning and are designed in such a way that there are safe spots, but these keep changing, and the time allowance to make it from one to another is pretty tight. Battle Unit Zeoth is a really rough ride, although the background to your beatdown is outstanding. The music in this game is a sublime, high-tempo, pumped-up racket that accompanies the carnage ahead of you. The effects are great too, and don't override the music in an intrusive way. An even higher level of praise, however, must go to the visuals. This game is one of the most stunning to look at on the system to date. Absolutely gorgeous throughout, especially the bosses, which often take up more than the whole screen, meaning you'll have to fly around them. Upon death, they split apart in this really cool screen wipe effect, coupled with some wicked explosion noises. Although the bosses and your sprite take up a larger than average portion of the screen, surprisingly it doesn't feel cramped. The whole screen is utilized economically and to great effect. There's an awesome looking cutscene once you defeat the final boss, where its gun arm blows up and the whole thing explodes, but don't expect to see it. This game is not a long one, but it will take a massive deal of effort and skill to conquer it. One of the best looking games so far, but also one of the hardest. I might even chicken out a little and say that the difficulty takes away from the enjoyment ever so slightly, and I like tough games. Even so, Battle Unit Zeoth is a real unknown Game Boy exclusive title with no sequels, but one well worthy of your time. Ishida Yoshio Tsumego Paradise, DMG-IGJ. Developed and published by Pony Canyon. Ishida Yoshio is, according to the internet, a Go player. Weird thing to be famous for, but whatever. This game is a bit like that, except you're not directly playing the game, a variation on Othello-type games. Instead, you have to solve puzzles based on the rule set. There are 100 stages, each of which has an in-game situation presented to the player. You control the black pieces, and essentially have to stop the white pieces winning by placing your stones on the correct coordinates. You need to block the white stones from being placed in groups of 3, vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. There is apparently a hint button in the game. Supposedly pressing B will give you clues how to beat a stage. It's hit and miss whether it actually works, however. The graphics do what they're supposed to, nothing special, although Yoshio-san's haunting face is pixelated nicely, technologically speaking, on the entry screen. The music in-game is heavily limited to a couple of Johann Strauss pieces, and the sound effects when you make a mistake are just rude. You'll definitely play this one in silence. All in all, very little to comment about. If you're into reversey, Go, or any of those types of games, I guess you might enjoy a different take on the concept. If you can get through all 100 levels, you have way more patience than me, however. I managed about 4.
They're back, and just as terrifying. Gremlins 2, The New Batch, the sequel to one of the highest-grossing movies in Warner Brothers history. Sunsoft is bringing this summer's hottest movie to video games with Gremlins 2, The New Batch, the video game for the Nintendo Entertainment System. This exciting game stars Gizmo the Mogwai. And as you know, there are 3 things you must never do to a Mogwai.
Don't let them get exposed to bright light.
Never feed them after midnight,
You can't get them wet.
or something terrible will happen. We warn you. In the Gremlins 2 video game, Gizmo battles his evil spawn, the Gremlins. And because it's from Sunsoft, you know this game features an incredible storyline, the most challenging gameplay, and the Sunsoft trademark. Graphics that practically burst from the screen. But even more, this game packs awesome kid appeal through the fantastic pulling power the Gremlins movie has among kids. Add to this a bold new print campaign and 30-second TV inspired by the movie. Video game players everywhere will be fighting to get this game.
Gremlins 2, The New Batch, DMG-GR, developed and published by Sunsoft. Following the Gremlins' Night of Havoc, Mr. Wing recently passed away, and his store was torn down. Gizmo attempted to escape, but was kidnapped. Now, Gizmo is a prisoner in the genetics lab inside the Clamp Center. Whoa, that's rough. Based on the film of the same name, in Gremlins 2 you play as the little Gizmo, and as the storyline suggests, you need to work your way through all the levels to escape from your captors. There are some luscious looking levels to play through, from a movie studio to a secret lab. All the sprites are very nicely detailed and the perfect size. Sunsoft learnt from their mistakes with Batman. The backgrounds are gloriously detailed, and the visuals in the cutscenes and in between lives are incredibly well drawn. Visually, this game was a real accomplishment. Gremlins 2 also has some of the most stonking music up to this point. Sunsoft always excelled in the audio department, and this is no different. They used such a broad array of sounds, emulating a drum kit better than it should be possible to. The movement of your character is just the right speed, and the jump height seems fair. It's not just a linear left to right kind of affair. Quite often you need to climb up and down, or double back on yourself. Lots of thought went into the level layouts. You need to collect a pencil to be able to attack, and it's only a short-range weapon that takes a couple of hits to kill most things. You can also pick up a radio, which gives you one musical note to throw at an enemy, and there are boxing gloves that pop out of a box, which you can activate by jumping on them. Gizmo's pretty weak. Although he can take several hits, it's pretty tough to defeat an enemy without getting hit yourself. The weapons all suck, and enemies that take 4 or 5 hits don't stop coming towards you while you're attacking, meaning you'll more than likely lose some health somewhere. This is especially true during the boss fights. These things take a ton of hits, seeing as how your attack is so weak. You can't attack and move at the same time either, which really hinders you. That small handful of hit points will dwindle as quick as anything. There's a pencil weapon which is weak as hell, and a musical note that you can throw ahead of you but that's really all in terms of offense, although there is a suitcase that you can hide in for a brief period that makes you invulnerable. Pixel-perfect jumps abound as well as a couple of instances of the mortal sin of video games, enforced damage sections. All this renders Gremlins 2 The New Batch a very good game with a couple of frustrating gameplay elements that stop it being a world beater. One of the best presented video games on the whole system, for sure. Still comes highly recommended. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/Portable Power Podcast. Or subscribe on the YouTubes. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.